Revenge with Karen.
I want to be clear, this isn't about performance, the VP said, flashing that oily, too-white smile that always reminded Lydia of an overpolished tombstone. You've been incredibly professional. That was the first red flag. In her 15 years at Encompass Cloud Systems, no one had ever complimented her professionalism unless something toxic was about to land. Lydia didn't flinch. She sat in the conference room with the lights too bright and the air too cold, across from a man she had trained 6 years ago, who now made double her salary and still didn't know what a deployment pipeline was. To his left sat Trina from HR, flipping through a manila folder with the same bored efficiency as someone scanning a takeout menu. "I'm sorry, this is a what meeting?" Lydia asked, voice calm but frost-laced. "Realignment," the VP said, clasping his hands like a prayer made out of smugness. "Right-sizing ahead of Q2 to ensure sustainability. You know, steering the ship before the iceberg shows up." Trina chuckled like he'd cracked a real joke. Right-sizing. It was the corporate version of "it's not you, it's me," except it was definitely you. Lydia stared at the folder. A faint paperclip shimmered under the fluorescent lights. Somewhere deep in her brain, memory filed itself away. The exact number of document versions she'd seen over the years when other employees were offboarded. None of them had this many pages. "We're sunsetting a few legacy roles," the VP continued, eyes doing that thing where they darted to the glass door behind her, already frosted for privacy, but still visibly reflecting movement outside. People walked past. A few coworkers slowed down, pretending not to glance in. "Honestly, this doesn't reflect on your work. We just need more agility in our structure." More agility. Lydia almost laughed. She was the agility. Her scripts deployed faster than the CTO's temper. Her commit history was clean enough to eat off of. Her name was on every goddamn infrastructure policy they still followed, except now they were pretending she was an old couch taking up space. "And since you're not client-facing," he added, shrugging like that made it easier, "this change shouldn't disrupt any core relationships." Lydia blinked once, then twice, because that one cut. Not client-facing. Of course she wasn't, she was internally facing. The reason clients never saw the fires was because she smothered them before the first spark hit the logs. But sure, let's pretend that made her disposable. The VP slid the folder across the table. Trina took over with her soft HR voice, walking Lydia through the transition package like it was a welcome basket and not a kick in the ribs. 2 week severance. NDA terms. A line about returning all company property including devices and badges. The tone never changed. This was all rehearsed, scripted, sanitized. Lydia didn't say much, didn't ask questions. She just flipped through the papers with steady hands, eyes scanning, absorbing every clause, every signature line. 15 years, boiled down to 6 bullet points and a cheap pen that barely wrote. "We'd love it if you could keep this quiet today," Trina said sweetly. "Let your team hear it from leadership. Of course. Wouldn't want the truth disrupting morale. We really hope you leave feeling respected," the VP added, standing up prematurely like that was a wrap. "And again, thank you for being so professional." She stood too, smoothed her blouse, picked up the folder, said, "Only this, you'll want to revoke my access." The VP blinked, confused. IT handles that automatically. Lydia didn't smile, didn't flinch, just looked at him like the spreadsheet he was, full of bad data and desperate formatting. "They'd better," she said, then walked out. Her badge deactivated before she even reached the elevator. She passed her team on the way out. Dinish, who still struggled with Git merges, Clara, was halfway through building the updated CI/CD widget Lydia had spec'd out the week before, and Oliver, the junior who'd once asked her what infrastructure as code even meant. None of them looked up. None of them knew. By the time she reached the sidewalk, the breeze felt sharper, colder. Or maybe that was just how fast rage can cool when it congeals into clarity. Lydia didn't cry. She didn't rage. Opened her phone and refreshed the internal calendar she still had synced. A meeting invite caught her eye. Relaunch strategy check-in mandatory for all DevOps. Scheduled for next Tuesday. Topic: deployment readiness. Her name wasn't on the invite, obviously, but her signature still was, buried deep in the security layer of the code that would soon choke without it. They thought they'd removed her. They'd only unpinned the grenade. Lydia was halfway through microwaving a lukewarm slice of leftover lasagna when her phone buzzed with the first reorg email. Subject line: exciting changes for Q2. It was from the VP who just surgically removed her from the company like a cyst with too much institutional memory. She tapped it open with the same morbid curiosity one uses to poke a roadkill raccoon, something foul that might still twitch. It was corporate Mad Libs, top to bottom. Agility, customer first, streamlined workflows. But buried halfway down was the real rot, a new DevOps structure designed to empower emerging talent. A junior developer named Kevin was now listed as acting lead for pipeline operations. Kevin, the same Kevin who once asked if YAML was that Pokémon thing. Lydia blinked slowly, then went back to her lasagna. It beeped. She didn't move. A second email hit, then a third, then 5 in rapid succession, each more panicked than the last. Apparently, the company had scheduled a major product relaunch. New UI, backend overhaul, whole new deployment framework. The kind of update they hyped in investor decks, but never actually pulled off without duct tape and several late-night Slack arguments. Except now, the person who built the deployment pipeline was on her couch, eating cold pasta, with access to all the email threads and zero reason to intervene. She scrolled through the internal chatter like a ghost at her own wake. Half of them didn't even realize she was gone. A project manager tagged her in a comment about testing the rollback scripts. Another linked to her old Confluence page and wrote, "Can we get Lydia's approval on this before Friday?" The irony was so rich it needed a cholesterol warning. She refreshed her inbox again. Another thread popped up. This time was a screen-capped Slack message forwarded by a friend who still worked there. The image was blurry but legible. "Do we have the Cert chain ready? Senior Product Manager, 3:08 p.m. That was the moment her lasagna truly went cold. The Cert chain, her Cert chain. The one she'd set up under strict SOC 2 compliance rules. The one the CTO insisted they include in every production-level deployment after that one nightmare audit 3 years ago. One, most importantly, that only she controlled. Not because of some power trip, because that's what the policy required. Keys were never shared. Every change had to be signed, validated, logged, and certified. And Lydia, being Lydia, had followed the rules to the letter. Which meant, if they hadn't transferred control, and she was almost certain they hadn't, they were building a digital skyscraper on top of an expired lease. Laugh that escaped her mouth sounded nothing like humor. It was closer to a bark. One part exhausted disbelief, one part bitter satisfaction. She flipped open her laptop, still had admin access to her personal vault, still had copies of the infrastructure diagrams, still had the audit trail receipts. She opened a folder labeled Pipeline Sign-Offs, another titled SOC 023, Policy Versions, and a third, Cert Auth Chain, Lydia Active. Each document opened crisp, time-stamped, untouched. The company hadn't just underestimated her, they'd forgotten what she was. Not a legacy role, not a ghost in the system. She was the system. Another message came in, her final one before the inevitable access purge. It was from Clara, quietly sent at 3:42 p.m. They just put Kevin in charge of the Lydia stuff. I don't think he knows what that is. He asked me if the deploy password was in Google Drive. Lydia's fingers hovered over the keyboard. Then she started typing. Not in response, Clara didn't need to be dragged into this, but in her own journal. The place she kept everything, lists, logs, memories, pain, calculations. If they thought she was going to have a tantrum on LinkedIn like some downsized consultant begging for sympathy, they didn't know her at all. No, she would document. Quietly, meticulously. She began writing out the current state of the deployment framework, just from memory, which certs were expiring, where the auto rollback config might fail, who would panic when Jenkins started throwing unknown host errors. It was an autopsy in advance, because this wasn't just going to break. It was going to collapse, and when it did, she wouldn't need to gloat. She'd already be holding the black box. It started with a "Hey stranger" text, the kind that usually reeks of desperation or nostalgia. But Lydia had neither. She typed it anyway because this wasn't about friendship. It was about clarity. "Hey stranger, you still doing compliance stuff?" Within minutes, a reply pinged back, still swimming in red tape and coffee. "What's up?" His name was Raj, and she hadn't seen him in almost 3 years, not since he left Encompass Cloud for a boutique compliance firm that actually respected lunch breaks and paid out bonuses on time. He'd always been the kind of guy who could recite data retention policy like poetry and make jokes about ISO standards that somehow landed. She asked him the question plainly. Hypothetically, if someone set up a code signing cert as part of SOC2 deployment compliance. And that cert was under their name, not the company's who owns it. He called her. Immediately. No preamble, he said. Just gonna drop a compliance bomb on me like that? I don't have time for the usual foreplay, Lydia replied, sipping stale coffee on her balcony. Raj exhaled, and she could practically hear him booting up his mental legalese engine. Okay. If the cert was created through an individual controlled account under their name, was never explicitly transferred or revoked by the company, then yeah, it's theirs. Most orgs screw this up, honestly. They focus on keys, not the policy chain, unless your employment contract had a blanket clause transferring digital asset ownership retroactively. It didn't, she said. I checked. In that case, Raj said technically it's still yours, until you revoke it or it expires naturally. She was silent for a beat. Raj lowered his voice. Lydia, they not remove you from the cert chain? They didn't even ask, she said. He let out a long, impressed whistle. Holy shit. After they hung up, Lydia sat still for a long while, her phone glowing in the dark like a loaded gun with no fingerprints on it. The air around her changed. It wasn't grief anymore. It wasn't insult. It was math. And she'd always been good at math. She opened the PDF copy of her severance agreement, one she'd read through the first night, but hadn't fully absorbed. Now she wasn't just looking, she was auditing. Clause 12, digital access and assets not explicitly transferred or returned remain under the former employee's control, unless otherwise stated. Clause 14, revocation of digital credentials may be performed at the former employee's sole discretion, unless deemed retaliatory under state law. She reread that line 3 times. At her sole discretion was vague, beautifully vague. Corporate boilerplate lazily copied from a template written by someone who assumed everyone left quietly, who assumed professionalism equaled passivity. But Lydia had always followed the rules. That's why this would work. She wasn't breaking anything. She was just cleaning house. She pulled up her exported bookmarks folder from her work laptop backup. There, still intact, was every infrastructure document she'd authored, co-authored, or edited into non-existence. She opened the deployment policy index. Revision date, 7 months ago. Author, L. Kim, Senior Dev Ops Engineer. It was all still there. Certificate Authority Ownership. Primary contact for lifecycle maintenance. L. Certificate Revocation Authority. Individual controller unless corporate override applied revocation deadline policy. 48 hours pre-expiration required unless emergency procedure is triggered. She opened the control panel next. Her Cert Manager login still worked. Username, Kim Deploy. 2-factor pinged her phone. Approved. Dashboard loaded. Status, active. Valid until 2027. Controller, L. Kim. She didn't touch anything. Not yet. Instead, she clicked Access Logs. Reviewed the last 6 months. No transfers, no override requests, no corporate elevation flags, no second-party login attempts. Just her, still in control. She scrolled further. A change log from Kevin, bless his heart, attempting to reconfigure the Jenkins pipeline with a placeholder cert. It had been rejected. Twice. At the bottom of the screen was a button, Revoke Certificate. Below it, this action is permanent and may not be reversed without new validation. She closed the window. Not yet. This wasn't vengeance. This was liability management. She began organizing a folder on her desktop. /encompass cert lifecycle /screenshots policy docs legal agreement PDF access log CSV Raj call notes txt. She knew the storm was coming. She wasn't going to shout. She wasn't going to warn them. She was going to do exactly what they claimed they wanted, be professional. And when the lights went out, they'd remember every clause she followed, every box she checked, every rule they thought made them safe. It started with a hashtag, #ECS reloaded pompous. Vague, trademarked. Lydia saw it first on LinkedIn, sandwiched between someone's work anniversary and an influencer claiming burnout could be cured with oat milk. The post came from the VP himself, Ryan, same man who had cut her loose like a snagged fishing line. His profile pic was freshly updated, and his teeth somehow whiter. He stood in front of a branded backdrop, smiling like he'd just invented the concept of software. Excited to turn the corner with our biggest relaunch yet. Proud of the team for embracing change, building resilience, and staying #agile. #ECS reloaded #future is now Lydia clicked through the comments. Predictable sycophants. Love the energy. Let's go. Can't wait for launch day. She refreshed her coffee, pulled up a blank document, and started typing notes. Not legal ones, not technical, just observational, because the more noise they made, the more public the failure would become. By noon, a mid-tier tech blog had picked up the scent. The kind of outlet known for sponsored thought leadership pieces and sidebars cluttered with ads for Docker boot camps. The article headline dripped with overcompensation. Encompass Cloud preps for zero downtime reinvention. Inside the Dev Ops Masterplan zero downtime. Lydia nearly choked on her coffee. She skimmed the article. Buzzwords stacked like dirty laundry, microservices, seamless migration, next-gen CI/CD architecture, quotes from the CTO, promises of stability, scalability, cleaner code, and faster deploys. And then, like a cherry on top of a burning dumpster, this gem, our infrastructure is airtight. We've reduced deployment lag to under 3 seconds, with full compliance baked in. Full compliance, Lydia thought, her lip twitching. You mean the compliance I built and they forgot about? She didn't need to guess where this was heading. She'd seen enough relaunches weaponized as ego-fueled cover stories. Internally, platform had likely been duct-taped into presentability by junior devs terrified of asking real questions. She'd read enough Slack leaks to know Kevin was barely treading water. That evening, her inbox pinged. It was a Dropbox link. No sender name, just thought you'd want to see this, a friend. Inside the folder, a recording of an internal all-hands webinar, leaked and unlisted. Lydia clicked play. The video opened with canned music and awkward transitions, kind of branding you'd get if a startup hired a Fiverr designer and paid them an exposure. The CTO, Michael, 40-something, Silicon Valley effect with a suburban dad haircut, stepped onto a tiny platform in front of a wall of monitors flashing stats and jargon. Welcome, everyone, he said, overly cheery. This is the start of something new. Cleaner pipelines, better uptime, and a release model that finally puts our customers first. Lydia leaned back, watching. Waiting. Slide appeared behind him. Launch date. August 30, 10 o'clock a.m. PST. There it was. A target, a timestamp, publicly declared, locked in. We've eliminated bottlenecks, Michael continued. Our new stack is built for performance and resilience. And I'm proud to say, this will be our first true zero downtime deployment. He paused for emphasis, smiling like he expected applause. We've stress-tested the pipeline with every scenario we could imagine. Everything's automated. Everything's secured. We're ready. Lydia paused the video, stared at the screen. Let the moment breathe, the confidence, the blissful ignorance. She knew that tone, the tightrope arrogance of someone who didn't understand what they'd inherited but was already taking credit for it. Michael had always been the guy who skimmed her documentation, cherry-picked the parts he understood, and declared the rest too cautious. She rewound the video 5 seconds, played it again. Everything's automated. Everything's secured. She opened her Cert Manager dashboard. Status, active. Days remaining, 17. She opened a new file and titled it. Launch Chain Collapse Scenario MD. It started with a bullet point. Live event scheduled for 10 o'clock a.m. PST, Aug 30 current cert. Valid revocation. Silent, immediate, irreversible impact. Deployment failure on push reaction time, EST. 30-90 seconds of confusion before full-blown chaos. She closed the file. Back on LinkedIn, the VP had posted another gem. Innovation requires sacrifice. Glad we're finally moving on from outdated systems. Lydia smiled without warmth. Outdated systems? Funny. The one they were still building on had her name embedded in every root, chain, and policy flag. Sacrifice, indeed. The offer came folded between lines of formality and polite implication, like a secret note passed under the boardroom table. Subject, potential opportunity, confidential inquiry. It was from a recruiter whose name Lydia recognized, not because she'd ever worked with him, but because he only reached out when a company really wanted someone. Not resume scanning, not cold outreach. This was premeditated. She clicked the email. Strategic partner is interested in speaking with you about a leadership opportunity in systems reliability and deployment security. Your reputation precedes you. This is a sensitive conversation, but worth your time. It didn't say which company, but she could guess. 3 days later, Lydia was on a Zoom call with someone who didn't need to introduce himself. Alan Vesey, Chief Infrastructure Officer at Covariant Scale. Big player. Big money. Known for acquiring undercooked platforms, gutting them, and rebuilding something bulletproof in half the time. His camera was off. Just a black screen and a smooth voice, direct but oddly respectful. I'll get right to it, he said. We're circling Encompass Cloud. No offer yet. Due diligence is ongoing. Lydia said nothing. She just sipped her coffee and waited. We know you were let go recently. We also know you were the primary architect on the deployment and compliance stack. We don't need to confirm or deny that, he added quickly. We're not asking you to breach anything, but we'd like you here. Officially, he laid it out. A full-time role, remote first, 30% above her old salary. Bonus structure so generous it felt like a dare. But that wasn't what caught her attention. It was the last sentence of the offer packet, highlighted in the internal memo that accidentally got attached, clearly meant for internal eyes only. Her insight is a critical asset. Timing of the ECS relaunch is pivotal. Watching closely, see Appendix C for Cert dependency analysis. Lydia's pulse slowed. Appendix C, she scrolled. Found it, there it was. A flowchart of the ECS launch architecture with one node circled in red. Code signing certificate, active controller. L. Kim status. Unknown risk, high mitigation. TBD they knew. Not just that the cert was hers, but what it meant. What could happen if it wasn't transferred, replaced, or acknowledged before launch? She clicked back to the main contract and signed. There was no hesitation. The pen didn't shake. An onboarding email arrived that afternoon. Covariant didn't waste time. She was assigned to a sandbox project for observation. The repo had nothing in it, just a README titled Welcome Home. It made her chuckle. The first honest laugh in weeks. That night, she closed her laptop and stood by the window, watching the summer thunder roll over the city skyline. She didn't feel anger anymore, not even satisfaction. Just equilibrium, the feeling of knowing you're the only adult in a room full of toddlers holding scissors. She opened her phone, set a new calendar event. Title, Cert Revoked Time, 09:59 a.m. PST date, August 30 alert, 1 hour before notes. They'll learn today. Saved it. No fireworks, no maniacal laughter, just a simple, quiet click. The power wasn't in the chaos that would come. The power was in knowing she didn't need to lift a finger when it did. It started as a murmur, one of those low-level vibrations that only the paranoid or the properly trained can detect. A friend from the inside sent her a message on Signal, 2 words, deploy stalling. Lydia didn't respond. She just minimized her browser, opened up her terminal, pinged the ECS product API endpoint out of idle curiosity. The response time had doubled, then tripled, then timed out entirely. By the time she refreshed LinkedIn, she could already see the crack forming. Someone from ECS, probably one of the interns they never bothered to properly onboard, had just liked a post from a DevOps subreddit. Not a post they'd written, but one posted under a throwaway account created 2 hours ago, already sitting at the top of the hot tab. Urgent. How to bypass cert validation temporarily during prod deploy? Lydia opened it, read it once, then again just to be sure. The post was a patchwork of red flags, panic, and badly worded desperation. Working on a live deploy, hitting a cert issue. Jenkins failing with permission errors on final push. How to temporarily bypass signature checks. We're on a tight launch schedule. Can't change cert owner right now. You could practically hear the whimpering behind the keyboard. One of the top comments was a screenshot of the jumbotron error GIF, a decades-old meme showing a massive 404 projected at a tech convention. Someone had captioned it, found the intern who just ruined a launch party. Lydia smirked, not out of cruelty, out of awe, because this wasn't just a mess. This was an unraveling, a live-action demo of how much duct tape held modern software together, how fast it crumbled when someone pulled the wrong thread. She refreshed the ECS website. They'd updated the homepage. Now, dead center above the fold, a slick black and white countdown timer. Launches in 5 days, 3 hours, 18 minutes underneath it, a tagline, seamless, scalable, secure. Lydia laughed, sharp and dry. On the back end, Jenkins' logs were probably spewing errors like a Vegas slot machine. Permission denied. Unauthorized cert. Signature mismatch. Nobody had escalated. No emails, no calls, no begging for help. She wasn't in their world anymore. She was vapor. Back inside the company, the CTO was apparently in full lockdown mode. That same friend on Signal sent another message. Michael's losing it. All deploys frozen. Slack's a crime scene. Apparently, he'd called an emergency Zoom titled All Hands. Situation room. He bellowed through gritted teeth about operational discipline and not airing dirty laundry on public forums. He'd locked down GitHub permissions. Frozen build triggers. Escalated everything to Tier 1 escalation, except the actual root of the issue. because the actual root was Lydia, and no one dared say her name. They were too proud, or too blind, or too stupid. Probably all three. She opened the folder she'd built weeks ago. /encompass cert lifecycle / inside. The logs, the screenshots, the compliance policies, each timestamped, each naming her directly as the cert controller, each outlining the requirement for cert handoff before major release. She hadn't hidden anything. They just never looked. Another public post hit Hacker News later that evening. Relaunch trouble? ECS junior engineer asks Reddit for help deploying to prod. The comments were brutal. Puts a junior on production without a fallback cert. Classic startup move. Fire the architect, then complain the blueprint's missing. Lydia scrolled slowly, sipping tea. Her phone buzzed. Another calendar notification. Cert revoke, 4 days, 21 hours remaining, no need to rush. They were already building the gallows. All she had to do was let gravity do its thing. The apartment was quiet. Not the kind of quiet you notice immediately, but the kind that settles in after days of tension, finally stop buzzing behind your teeth. No alerts, no messages, no door slams from upstairs neighbors. Just the faint hum of the air conditioning and the slow, steady rhythm of Lydia's breathing. It was 11:42 p.m. Thursday. She sat at her desk in a faded t-shirt that still smelled like printer toner and trade show coffee, her hair tied up, a half-drunk mug of tea cooling beside her trackpad. Only light in the room came from her laptop screen, bathing her fingers in cold white. One tab open, Cert Authority Trademark Dashboard. Username, Elkim Deploy 2-factor pinged her phone. She tapped Approve without hesitation. Login successful. Dashboard loaded. No fireworks, no alarms. No warning pop-ups telling her she'd been removed or locked out or replaced. Just her name, sitting exactly where it always had. A digital signature, still tethered to the heart of Encompass Cloud's most sensitive deployment infrastructure, like an old anchor nobody had the foresight to cut loose. She clicked into the access logs. The most recent entry, a Jenkins job request, denied. Source IP, ECS internal. User, Kevin Dev error. Cert authorization failed. Lydia tilted her head slightly. There were dozens of them, all time-stamped over the past 3 days. Jenkins had been trying to execute final stage deploys, each bouncing off the cert like a bird smacking glass. But here was the important part. No revocation requests. Not one. No attempt by ECS to request control. No submission of new public keys. No corporate override flag. Nothing. They hadn't even tried. She checked the certificate chain settings. Primary controller, L. Kim status, active valid until 2027 last credential change. Never. She reached for her tea, took a sip, cold now, but she didn't care. She hovered her mouse over the status field. A tiny drop-down arrow appeared. She clicked it. Options. Active, suspended, inactive. No need for deletion. No need for drama. Just a quiet end to a thread they forgot to snip. She glanced at the framed photo on her bookshelf, her old team at a DevCon 5 years ago. Everyone younger, hopeful. She remembered that version of herself, the one who still believed merit was rewarded and documentation would always be respected. She wasn't angry anymore. Anger had burned away weeks ago. What was left now was procedure, professionalism, and a faint sense of poetic timing. Her cursor moved, clicked. Status, inactive. A small loading bar appeared. Processing, then, update successful. That was it. No explosion. No hiss of gas being released. Just a silent shift in control, a valve turned off, a bridge lifted just as a parade of suits prepared to march across. She logged out. Closed the lid of her laptop. No NDA breached. No malicious interference. Just a loose end tied, in accordance with the very compliance policy they had forced her to write. Clause 14 of her severance agreement had been clear. Revocation of digital credentials may be performed at the former employee's sole discretion unless deemed retaliatory under state law. She had the logs. She had the timeline. She had screenshots, export receipts, Slack leaks, calendar invites, and the CTO's recorded promise of a zero downtime launch, all of it. This wasn't revenge. This was hygiene. She stood, stretched, and walked into the kitchen, flipping off the lights on her way. In 5 days, at exactly 10 o'clock a.m., they would push the button in front of a live-streamed audience of investors, press, and potential partners. And the pipeline would stare back at them, cold, silent, unmoving, just like it was designed to when the signature chain was broken. Lydia slept that night without setting an alarm. She didn't need one. The live stream kicked off at 9:59 a.m. sharp. There was the usual elevator music humming behind a splash screen that proudly declared, Encompass Cloud Presence. ECS Reloaded, the future, signed, sealed, delivered. In the bottom corner of the screen, 4.3K viewers and climbing. Tech blogs, investors, clients, competitors. Everyone watching, everyone expecting. The stage was obnoxiously minimalist, black floors, glass podiums, massive 20-foot jumbotron center stage pulsing a countdown. 0001. 13 Lydia sat cross-legged on her couch, coffee in hand, a quiet smile tugging at her mouth. She'd muted the stream but kept the captions on. The chat was already a wildfire of emojis, hype, and badly punctuated anticipation. She took a sip. The VP strutted onto the stage like he was about to pitch a new religion. Ian was wearing a sharp blazer over a fun startup t-shirt, sleeves pushed up like he was ready to roll them further if the vibes called for it. His voice had that forced casual cadence, like he wanted everyone to know he was relatable but also deeply, profoundly in charge. Good morning, world, he beamed, stepping up to the podium. What a ride it's been. Today isn't just about new features. Today is about transformation. About lean innovation, about stripping back the bloat and rebuilding from the ground up together. Lydia's smile widened. She could practically see the sticky notes that line had been scribbled on during some 9 p.m. strategy huddle. He launched into a bloated 5-minute monologue, quoting fake stats, thanking departments he couldn't name, mispronouncing Kubernetes again. Then he handed it off to the CTO like he was tossing a baton made of live wire. Michael, always the showman, stepped forward with a smug little nod to the audience and an iPad clutched like a sacred relic. And now, he said, the moment we've all been building toward. Real-time, zero downtime deployment. No smoke, no mirrors, just execution. He tapped the deploy trigger with the kind of flourish that suggested this had been rehearsed dozens of times. And then he looked up. So did the crowd. The jumbotron blinked once, then twice. Then, old red letters stretching across the 20-foot screen. Fatal. Code signing certificate invalid error. Permission denied deploy aborted silence. Not metaphorical silence, the actual kind. No music, no transitions, no polite clapping. Just a thick, brutal absence of sound that rolled over the crowd like a thundercloud that refused to crack. Lydia leaned forward slightly, her coffee balanced perfectly on the arm of her chair. Ryan blinked. Once. Twice. Then turned. Lead to the CTO. Michael was frozen. The color had drained from his face so fast he looked embalmed. The jumbotron didn't change. Fatal. Code signing certificate invalid. The camera cut to a wide shot of the audience. Several people were already whispering. A few held phones to their chests, texting furiously. One woman in the front row, a partner from one of their largest clients, tilted her head and mouthed something that looked suspiciously like, "What the hell is that?" Michael, still at the console, tapped the iPad again. Nothing. He tried the keyboard next. Enter, ESC, F5. A silent panic blooming like mold across his face. The stream chat was no longer emojis. Uh-oh. Cert error live El Mao. Did they really forget to sign the release? Call the DevOps priest. This exorcism's going sideways. Backstage, someone must have finally realized the feed was still live. The screen cut to black for a moment and flashed back to the event logo and eventually settled on the classic corporate stalling tactic. Please stand by, experiencing technical difficulties. But the damage was done. Lydia glanced at her phone. 9:59:42 a.m. Perfect. She closed the stream window and pulled up her inbox. One unread message had landed exactly 34 seconds after the deploy failure. Subject, ECS deployment status, urgent escalation sender, unknown at internal com preview. Hi Lydia, I know it's been a while. Hoping you can. She didn't even open it. Instead, she opened her calendar. Tapped on the now finished event. Cert Revoked 09:59 a.m. white heavy checkmark completed. She didn't laugh. She didn't clap. She just sat there still, calm, the way a good engineer does after a successful dry run. She hadn't sabotaged anything. She'd simply flipped a switch. When they built, one she maintained, one they forgot existed. And the whole damn building had gone dark. The stream never came back. Not even a polished thank you for joining slide or some chirpy elevator tune to soften the collapse. Just dead air. And then, across the company, across the press, across every investor's carefully curated Slack channel, panic. It spread fast, like a gas leak, invisible but unmistakable. Inside X's downtown office, War Room turned into a finger-pointing coliseum. Why isn't it building? Is it Jenkins? Check the cert again. Someone finally dug into the logs deep enough to find it. Buried in the deployment failure report under issuer chain controller, there it was, L. Kim. It took 3 seconds for the room to explode. The VP's voice, shrill and cracking, echoed off the conference room walls. Why the hell didn't we revoke that? A junior dev tried to explain something about how there was no revocation protocol, how the compliance doc Lydia wrote required ownership transfer through Cert Authority's legal channel, which they had forgotten. The CTO stammered about oversight and transition turbulence. No one listened. Within hours, PR put out a boilerplate apology. Due to unforeseen technical issues, we've temporarily paused the ECS reloaded deployment. We remain committed to excellence. Tech blogs weren't so kind. Encompass Cloud fumbles live launch. Internal Cert mishap halts release midstream. Did ECS fire the only person who knew how their product worked? Zero downtime, more like zero due diligence. Investors began pulling meetings. Slack channels hemorrhaged morale. Partners asked for clarity around technical leadership. At least one lawsuit threat was floated, quietly, through back channels. And then came the real gut punch. Lydia was cleaning her stovetop when the notification buzzed on her phone. Subject: strategic update from HR onboarding at Cover and Scale.com. Inside, a brief but direct message. We'd like to schedule a conversation your IP governance experience and team structure insights. You've made quite an impression. Below that, an internal memo, this time, intentionally shared with one highlighted line. Encompass acquisition paused pending full review. Compliance vulnerabilities discovered during launch incident require audit. No drama, no declarations. Just a clean break in the chain. She walked to her desk, opened her bank portal, watched the signing bonus hit her account. High 5 figures, wired on time, no questions asked. She didn't toast herself. No victory playlist. Just the clink of ceramic as she poured another coffee. Across town, the VP was probably still pacing. CTO probably still blaming poor handoffs and unexpected sabotage, still trying to scrub her name from the logs. But they couldn't. She hadn't broken a thing. She documented everything, warned no one, violated nothing. Just quietly revoked her access on her terms under their policy. And they had broadcast their ignorance to the world, live, in HD. Lydia opened a new document, started jotting down ideas for a fault-tolerant rollout system, one where ownership couldn't be right-sized out of memory. She saved the file as Professional Closure V1. MD, they wanted lean innovation. She gave them lean. They wanted clean breaks. She gave them clean. They wanted professionalism, and she delivered it with absolute precision. Thanks for joining the fun, you office survivors. Subscribe for more switch-flicking drama. Let's make your former coworkers sweat.